Hello, everybody, and welcome to Common Censored 123. This is episode 123. This is the show where we talk censored stories and people, sensible solutions, and common ground movements to fight and build.
And sometimes other shit.
And that is the voice of Eleanor Goldfield.
You say that kind of tentatively, like you're not really sure.
No, that was my smooth jazz voice.
Oh.
You're listening to Eleanor Goldfield.
Methinks you don't, you're not well versed in the smooth jazz voice.
No, not that well versed. And I am Lee Camp. Thanks for joining us. And let's dive on in.
You were definitely about to say, let's take the news from behind.
No, it wasn't.
Felt like it.
Although I think I have called this redacted tonight before, but
and then I almost have a heart attack because I'm like, oh shit, do I have to be funny now?
By the way, I've been doing, and actually this will serve as a promotion as well. I've been doing a lot more kind of moment of clarity, single news story, live streams almost every day, and people can get every different topic I talk about. They can get it all at leecamp.com, although the live stream is at youtube.com/momentofclarity. But I had several people in the last live stream in the comment section screaming, "Where's Eleanor?" So I think people think I have murdered you and have you in a trunk somewhere. But yes, we should tell the listeners you are still in Sweden.
I am still in Sweden, and the live streaming just doesn't really work unless we're sitting side by side, particularly in terms of time, because at 8 p.m. Eastern it's 2 a.m. Swedish time. So
right, there's a time difference there.
Yeah,
but we will be back in the same zip code in at the beginning of September. So
indeed.
Have no fear, folks. I have not killed her yet.
Dun dun dun.
The planning is still in place.
Cue the Hitchcock creepy music.
But we hope everyone's hanging on out there. I think that's the best we can hope for now. Things are getting worse and worse economically, as anyone with half a brain knew they would. I did a segment on Redacted Tonight either last week or comes out this week. I don't know. I can't remember. But 80,000 by the end of July, Yelp is estimating 80,000 American businesses have gone out of business. Like they closed for the pandemic, not knowing they were going to go out of business, but they are never opening again. Right. And that's just through the end of July, and that's with all of the stimulus. So I can't imagine what's on the horizon. And yet, I want to start off with what we're so excited to see at this Republican National Convention.
I just once again have to tell you, Lee, that I very much envy your stomach of steel. No. No, it's not that. I mean, I also don't give a fuck, but I have to commend you on your incredible, like, you freaking nickname you Ironsides, because your ability to watch this and not like projectile vomit continuously throughout the entire episode is really commendable, I think.
I do. I just have a bucket with me. Which reminds me of there were these god-awful, when I used to do stand-up comedy in New York City, the worst shows of the year were these prom shows where all of the New York high schools would like basically rent out comedy clubs for like midnight on a Thursday or something, and they would send the kids there so that the kids didn't go and just like fucking murder people. And so they would send them to these comedy clubs. And the worst one I ever did was at Dangerfield's Comedy Club. And the kids came in and they were, just the dregs of humanity. It was Jersey Shore, but without the cameras on. And they all come walking in. They're already drunk. They all have flasks in their jackets because they're not going to be served alcohol. So they all have flasks. And Dangerfield is aware that this is how this works, but they make a lot of money, so they don't give a shit. and they put buckets out around the room for people to vomit in.
Wait, what?
There were just buckets placed around the room.
Stop.
And I didn't see anyone vomit in any of them, but that's why they came out with a load of buckets and placed them around the room.
Wow.
And it was probably the single worst show I've ever been on. Like, literally, you couldn't say 2 words without somebody just yelling stupid shit. And it was meaningless. It was like someone. It was the equivalent of. I know this is a crazy tangent, but it was the equivalent of if someone said, "Can you just babysit for 20 minutes? You're on stage for 20 minutes. Can you babysit 120 drunk 16-year-old Jersey Shore kids in a room and just babysit them for 20 minutes, and then we'll switch you out with a new babysitter."
It's also mind-boggling that they would be like, "Oh yeah, we know that they're shit-faced, therefore we're just going to put buckets out for them." I mean, wow.
Well, Dangerfield's more than most clubs didn't give a shit about the quality of the comedy. They just wanted the income. They didn't they would put the worst comedians up. Another famous story. I'm continuing down this tangent because I feel like people are probably enjoying this to some degree.
I mean, I am. I don't know if anyone else is.
Another famous story was this room was awful and this guy's on stage, and when someone's being annoying, you try and pick them out of the crowd and talk and maybe make fun of them. It depends on the comedian, but maybe make fun of them, because normally if they get a little bit of attention, they might shut up or whatever. You often can't just ignore them. And so he does that, and his time is up. So I can't remember what he said. He must have said something remotely insulting. And his time is up, so he says goodnight. And as he's switching places with the MC walks up on the stage, he walks off the stage. A glass comes flying out of the audience, lands on a piano that's on the stage, ricochets off of that and shatters on the wall. And then the comedian that had been the intended target, gets off stage, and a couple minutes go by, and he looks back in the room, and that audience member is still sitting in the room. And he goes to management. He's like, "He just threw a glass at my head. Why is he still sitting in the room?" And management's like, "Oh, we talked to him. He's had kind of a rough day, and he's not going to do it anymore. He tried to kill me."
Wow, dude. Yeah.
They didn't care.
No, it's pretty amazing. I mean, I know that in the comedy world, it's probably similar to the music world, but how horribly bands or artists are treated by management of clubs. And it's like, you're the only reason you're here is because I'm here, asshole.
Right. No, it is true. I'd say 1 out of every 10 people running a comedy show is actually a good person that cares about the comedians.
Anywho, I just wanted to compliment you on your ability to watch the RNC, and somehow we got into that. But that was
This is not much of a tangent because they do put buckets around the RNC for people to puke in. So the RNC is this week, and the first speeches are tonight. And literally, they've already decided, because normally before or during the day on Monday, they meet and have negotiations on the platform and decide what the Republican national platform is. They just decided there is no platform this year. They just decided the platform is whatever Donald Trump says, which is crazy, even though the platform is meaningless. And we've talked about that before. The DNC acts like it has all this meaning, and it has basically no meaning. But the fact that the Republicans can't even pretend to know what it is they stand for is amazing. And I read an article, and I don't normally read Politico because it's mostly garbage, but it was kind of fascinating. They were talking to Republicans, some well-known Republicans, and even those Republicans could not come up with what it is that the Republican Party today stands for.
Well, and this is kind of odd because I feel like typically the Republicans are pretty good about just being like, actually, we don't fucking care. So it almost seems kind of out of character that the Republicans wouldn't just stand up and be like, our platform is, we don't fucking care about you. But I guess it's kind of odd that they wouldn't. But there's also, I'm also wondering if it's kind of like they're called the Swedish Democrats here in Sweden, but they're basically the fascist party. I feel like they're assuming that most people aren't going to read the platform, even if they put one out. But like here in Sweden, for instance, they're known as SD, the fascist party. Part of their platform was, for instance, that they wanted to bring back Nordic breeds of horses. Because those Arabian horses are really a problem, and we should take more pride in the Nordic style horses, which, by the way, if folks aren't familiar, Nordic style horses are usually like the horses that like drag carts and shit. They're not like the horses that you majestically see sweeping across like the yeah.
They're like stubby little things.
Because just like the trees are shorter here than they are like in the Amazon and shit, like the horses are just, they're good horses, don't get me wrong, but they're not like a superior race of horse or anything.
Can you imagine if someone was like the Republicans were like, from here on out, only American dogs, and everyone's like, I don't even know what that means. I don't even
know what that means. Well, that means that your British Terrier is no longer allowed.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think most animals came from other places.
But so maybe the Republicans are just like, well, look, most people don't really care. They're not going to read it, so why should we bother writing it,
Yeah, absolutely. But I guess you would think that even without the platform, you would think that you talk to like a Republican, let's say a Republican, House representative, that they might be able to articulate what it is that makes them Republican. But a lot of them, and so in the Politico article, they talked to Frank Luntz, who's one of the most, he had like a come to Jesus moment, as it's called, a few years ago. But basically, he was one of the most repulsive, just totally disgusting human beings that's like ever lived, because he created a lot of the wording and manipulation and euphemisms that the Republican Party used. Things like he said, let's change it from global warming to climate change, because climate change sounds nice and global warming sounds scary. It's like that kind of shit, just designed to drag humanity down into a death spiral. And now he like is critical of the Republican Party because he realizes what he did was like wrong or something. I don't cut him any slack. I think he needs to burn in hell somewhere. But they interviewed him, and he's like, I don't know. He tried to come up with what it is the Republican Party now stands for, and he couldn't. He was like, I don't actually know. Because all of the things they used to claim to stand for, like small government and things like that, it's all gone. I mean, you honestly can't articulate it unless you just say, fuck non-rich people, I guess.
Well, but I mean, that also, the DNC has the same problem. I mean, the things that they are supposedly meant to stand for is not at all what they stand for. And I mean, but they just keep saying it. They're just like, yeah, I mean, we care about people and we want you to, and then.
But it's funny, they are somehow worried that that the platform is going to come back to haunt them, because they like added on the platform that they were going to stop something like subsidies to big oil, and then they removed it.
Right, and then Biden came back and said, this was really hilarious. I mentioned this on another podcast earlier or last week, that Biden came back and he was like, no, actually, absolutely, we are going to drop fossil fuel subsidies. Not only that, guys, we are going to demand that the rest of the world do it too. And it's like, methinks thou dost protest too much. Like, you're gonna what? You're gonna demand? Like, first of all, that just really speaks to how your perspective on the rest of the world. Like, we can just tell them what to do. And then also, it's like you are trying too hard to prove that you're going to do something that you have absolutely no intention of doing. And so it's just like this, of course, it just speaks to like whatever you say on the campaign trail is bullshit once you get elected, like we saw with Obama and universal health care, for instance.
Apparently there's a quote, I didn't verify it, but seems legitimate, of Rahm Emanuel saying, if I could tell Biden what to do to win, stop with don't support defunding the police and don't support Medicare for all. That's what he believes would win.
Well, I mean, Rahm Emanuel, he's a special specimen.
Yeah, shithead Democrat who was Obama's chief of staff when Obamacare was put forward, and apparently, according to many reports, he was the one that like walked into the room when they were deciding what to do for healthcare, how to change it, and just said universal healthcare is off the table, forget it. And basically, went to the insurance company and was like, how do we get you guys to be excited about this?
Help us help the people get nothing.
So, in place of the DNC and the RNC, let's talk for a moment about Movement for a People's Party, that convention coming up. Our friend Nick Brana basically created the Movement for a People's Party. And don't worry, for those of you who I know there are some, and I feel I feel these people's heart is in the right place, because it includes my parents and stuff like that, who believe a lot of the things that I believe and stand for very similar things, but they feel like, oh, we just got to get Trump out of office. Now, they're wrong. That's not going to fix things. But I think their heart, if not their brain, is probably in a good place. And Movement for a People's Party is not running a presidential candidate. So you can support this movement, and you are not, it's not an active campaign against either the Republicans or the Democrats in the presidential contest. Now, in the long term, it absolutely is an active campaign against the Republicans and the Democrats.
Right.
Do you want to talk about it?
I do, but before that, and this is not meant to like, as the kids say these days, I'm making myself sound old again, but throw shade. This is not meant to...
Are you throwing shade at me?
Which, the first time I heard that, I think it was like somebody who was like 17 or something that said that to me, and I was like, wait, but I actually like the shade. I'm not really a direct sunlight kind of person. Like, I really like I like it a little bit cooler, like usually 10 degrees cooler than anyone else. So I prefer the shade.
You know what I like is that even though you're younger than me, you somehow come off sounding older, where you're like, I've never heard of Cardi B. And I'm like,
totally
I've never actively listened to Cardi B, but I do know she exists.
Yeah.
So I like that you make me sound young somehow.
My job, Lee, is to make you feel youthful. This is I'm here for that, okay?
What is this tickety-tockety I've heard about?
Well, I've also never used that. But hey, I have heard of it. So, you know what? Baby steps towards the 21st century. But so
you didn't know we've already put out a bunch of viral common censored dance numbers?
What, you and the cat, or? So this is not meant to, as it were, throw shade on your parents or anybody who has like their heart in the right place. But these are sharp words that are very true. Someone posted this the other day, and I thought it was rather well put. You don't miss Obama. You miss the validation of your complacency. You miss neutrality being an acceptable position. You miss the consequences of your ignorance not being so apparent. And I think that for a lot of people, that very much rings true, particularly people who are privileged in such a way that it doesn't matter who's in office, right? They get to enjoy the fruits of the machine on a pretty level playing field, right? They don't,
right.
The only thing that they get to say differently is, once again, I get to say that my president can have like that's the thing. With Biden, you wouldn't be able to say that my president can have a coherent thought, but you get to say
but
that
that's
like...
the point.
Right, but you get to say that like, oh, the blue team has the White House now, and that is somehow more like eloquent, or it's more chic. But on reality, on the ground, for people,
yeah.
I
think a lot of these people, I mean, you make good points, and I think a lot of these people, they confuse having a president who can put forward like an intelligent kind of justification, even though you and I talk all day about how it's a false justification, but an intelligent seeming justification for American empire. And so they confuse that Donald Trump can't do that. He can't, he is destroying the systems of government that effectively ran this machine of empire for so many years, and, accidentally. And so for them, they think that if the machine could just run smoothly again, then we could get back to having a country that cared about people and et cetera, when in fact, like you and I know, you dig down a little deeper and it wasn't a country that cared about people, and it was horrible things. And people point out that Joe Biden is responsible for locking up far more basically innocent people. I mean, I call nonviolent crimes pretty goddamn innocent people than Trump could almost ever hope to do. So it really is like, if we could just get back to a ostensibly like smooth sounding justification of our government and this empire, then things would be better.
Right. And speaking of things being better, the idea there for, as you mentioned, the Movement for a People's Party, which folks can learn more about at forapeoplesparty.org, I believe.
I thought it was just peoplesparty.org.
Oh, maybe it is.
Peoplesparty.org.
Oh, it is? Okay.
Yep.
Never mind.
No apostrophe.
So basically the goal of the People's Party is to create the split, so that to basically drive a wedge in between the two-party system to create space for the people's demands and the people's needs. And of course this has a lot to do with electoral politics. So I get if folks are like, fuck electoral politics, because I totally get that. But I also definitely believe in a diversity of tactics. And I believe that a lot of the people that are a part of the Movement for a People's Party, and a lot of the people that are, going to be speaking at this convention, have brilliant and vital and important things to say that are really inspirational and motivating and powerful for people to hear, regardless of what type of tactic you really want to spend time on following. So
right, and these ideas often go viral. I mean, a lot of the ideas that you and I support in this country right now have the room to discuss them and think about them intellectually has come from the outside sources, like whether it's the Green Party or elsewhere. And so you're right that the ideas that are put forward can be very important.
Right, and I also think it speaks to the importance of solidarity, and not having these silos where we say, if you don't agree 100% with everything that I agree with, we can't work together. And it's like, great, then we'll never fucking get anywhere. Because I mean, Lee, you and I don't even agree on 100% on everything. We almost agree.
I disagree with that.
But it's so important to make space for different ideas and different tactics, and to make space for folks who are really trying to work for the same things that we are demanding in these alternative spaces and alternative methods. So the Movement for a People's Party, they're having a convention was it Saturday? No, it's Sunday.
Whenever August 30th is.
I believe that's Sunday. But August 30th, from 4 p.m. to roughly 6 p.m. Eastern. And it's of course digital. And you can find information about that if you go to peoplesparty.org. And there are going to be, again, some brilliant folks, including Cornel West, Nina Turner, Danny Glover, and Susan Sarandon, apparently, which I'm sorry, but every time I hear the name Susan Sarandon, I just start singing that song from Rocky Horror Picture Show. Touch me, I want to be dirty. So wouldn't
that be great if that's all she did was that and she just left?
I mean, she's done so much good work, but that's the film for me of her. It's also just an amazing film.
Also Marianne Williamson, Mike Gravel, two former Democratic presidential candidates, which shows how, even former members of the Democratic Party are saying, fuck this shit. Then
Nina Turner's a Democrat, isn't she?
Oh, yeah, as well.
Mm-hmm.
Also, the two main keynotes is they're going to play a clip from my comedy special, and Eleanor Goldfield. Eleanor Goldfield will be speaking.
They will not be playing a clip from my comedy special, however.
I said Eleanor Goldfield will speak. Speak.
Yes, I'll probably be doing a spoken word piece. Just to mix it up a little bit. So again, y'all can go and sign up for that. That's happening on the 30th between 4 and 6 p.m. Eastern.
So yeah, highly recommend you spread the word and you enjoy it. And here's the thing: is this is like a young movement that is making waves. And if you have disagreements with things that are said or platform points or whatever, I don't know if they have an official platform, but it's like your voice has a far larger chance of being heard at MPP than at the Democratic Party. So.
Well, that's the other thing is that having worked with MPP in the past, there's a lot of horizontalism at work. So there's a lot of, and even though they've got almost like 100,000 people that are actually registered who support them. I think it's like 85 or 86,000 people. They are working very hard to maintain a sort of flat structure, which is really difficult. Even, for organizers who know, it's like even with fucking 40 people, you're like, So yeah. It's really powerful, the work that they're trying to do to not just put up a third party, because of course there are other parties, but the really powerful attempt to not replicate these systems of a hierarchy, to instead try to maintain this inclusive and flat structured system so that everybody's voice is actually heard, and so that this could also be one of those places where we have these important conversations that we're already having in other spaces, but hey, why not have them in more? Have those conversations about how do we avoid going back to their quote unquote normal? How do we ensure that our communities stay safe? What ways can we work around this two-party system? So I think regardless of whether your heart or head is in electoral politics, this is a great space to have these questions and connect with people who are also feeling the same things that you're feeling and having the same concerns and demands.
Damn straight. Let's move on to a birthday announcement.
I know, some good news. He's dead, but it's good news anyway. He didn't die a horrible death.
It wasn't our fault, was it?
No, and it wasn't. I don't think it was that recently. I don't actually know when he died, but anyway, in 1922,
it was 7 or 8 years ago.
August 24th, 1922, Howard Zinn was born. And for those of you who aren't familiar, Howard Zinn is an incredible historian and author, but probably most famously wrote A People's History of the United States, which sets the record straight on a lot of fakaked, whitewashed, and straight out lies about U.S. history in particular. And one of actually, you can share one of what's obviously your favorite quote, Lee, but my favorite quote from Howard Zinn is, "The future is an infinite succession of presents, and to live now as we think human beings should live, in defiance of all that is bad around us, is itself a marvelous victory."
Mm-hmm. Yes, he said some very important things and educated people in a grand way. And my favorite quote is tattooed on my arm. It says, "Small acts, when multiplied by millions of people, can become a power no government can suppress, a power that can change the world."
Yeah, I love that one.
Yeah.
Actually, they both give me goosebumps, so.
Mm-hmm. He has a whole book called, I believe, something like Governments Cannot Suppress or something like that, but or A Power Governments Cannot Suppress. And it's all about successful movements that have defeated large government forces, which is pretty cool.
Yes, indeedy. So that's just a quick little aside. And if you haven't read his work, I highly recommend it. And I do know some folks who, teach history that have started including his work in their history classes to basically, a lot of teachers don't have the privilege to kind of just say, I'm not using this stupid fucking history book, but they can have what do they call them, auxiliary texts or something that they're allowed to choose. And so I do know that there have been some teachers that have done that, and kudos to them, and good for all the students that are in their classes, because they will actually learn some legit shit in that class. But I definitely recommend it, even if you're just a parent and you're especially with your kid being home right now, it's a brilliant time to bring in some of that and be like, hey, by the way, when you go back to school and they try to tell you that, like, you know, the Black Panthers were this evil like organization, here, let's look at that real quick. So there's a lot of brilliant stuff.
Yeah, it's one of those books that I think a lot of schools and states are actively trying to like ban in the classroom because it gets people thinking. And thinking is the number one cause of trouble.
That be dangerous.
Yes. So Israel is, do you know how this sentence is going to end? Bombing again, bombing the shit out of Gaza, and it's getting hardly any media coverage. Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting has an article about how little media coverage the bombing is getting. When this article came out a few days ago, they said for the 11th straight night, the Israeli Defense Force, warplanes, have been bombing the densely populated Gaza Strip. Israel's bombs have caused considerable damage, forcing the shutdown of the area's only power plant. And yet your mainstream media is largely ignoring it.
Right. And when they're not ignoring it, they get, you get headlines like this. Israel responds to fire balloons from Gaza Strip with fighter jet strikes.
Making them sound somewhat similar when they're not at all. Fire balloons is like, they mean literally like a balloon tied to like a little thing on fire.
Yeah.
Whereas a jet with bombs is fucking, I mean, honestly, this is literally like a frog going up against a Hummer and on a highway, and the Hummer's bearing down to run over the frog, and they're like, frog sticks out tongue defenses against hum-like vehicle. Making it sound as if there's any sort of comparison to what's about to happen or what's happening.
Well, yeah, and the other one from the Washington Post is Israel strikes Gaza targets after arson balloons launched. Like, just that you could write that fucking arson balloons? Are you fucking kidding me?
Yeah, and a lot of people have died from those arson balloons, let me tell you. They have just really destroyed. There was a bird's nest that went down, I think, to one of the arson balloons.
Yeah, no, it's just, it is really, I mean, this is like, if you're, speaking of teaching, if you're looking for an inlet into media literacy, this is perhaps the most obvious and most like grotesque example of propaganda. The way that they really desperately try. I mean, an arson balloon, that doesn't, like, they're trying so hard to make this shit sound like it's an it's an even retaliation when Israel bombs the fuck out of Palestine after keeping Palestine and Palestinians under an oppressive apartheid rule for 70 plus years. So
so they try and make the like a balloon with a twig on fire sound like something really like some sort of James Bond weapon, arson balloon, and then they'll be like, and Israel responds with tomahawk, so that people envision like a hatchet being thrown back when in fact it's like a fucking Hellfire missile or some shit. Mm-hmm. But speaking of media literacy, this is the perfect segue into a listener question about media literacy.
Yes.
Right? So
this question came from Greta, or as we would say here on the mothership, Greta. So Greta writes that this is a sensitive subject, and I'm always worried that I'm going to wind up perpetuating some trope when I'm simply trying to defend Palestine. And Greta says that they came across a website that is hosted by the Anti-Defamation League. And so real quick, Lee, do you want to take this moment to just give a quick background on the ADL?
I mean, I don't have that much background on them. But I was going to say that basically she's asking about the difference between anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism.
Right, but real quick, I mean, I just want to say that
what background did you mean?
So basically, the Anti-Defamation League is a Zionist organization that comes across as trying to cloak itself in a basically anti-defamation. Like they're against anti-Semitism, but really what they are is that they're pro-Israel and they're pro-Zionist. And this link that Greta shared asking if this would be a good resource, quick answer is absolutely not. Please do not share this around as an
explain
example.
What it is.
I'm
shows.
going.
Oh.
I'm working on it. Christ on a cracker.
You just wanted to get the scolding in first.
No.
Absolutely not.
No,
Don't use this.
Just in case Greta was like, cool, I'm going to share this. Like, so the headline is, incredibly misleading, but it's the sort of clickbaity headline that makes you think, wait, what? Or, maybe that's something. The headline is anti-Zionism or criticism of Israel is never anti-Semitic. Which, of course, just right there, it's, well, that's not true because there's no such thing as like an absolute like this. If you're criticizing Israel because you're like, I hate Jews, then obviously that's not okay.
And it fooled me at first because I didn't know it was Anti-Defamation League because they just sent us the link to the website. And when I saw that headline, criticism of Israel is never anti-Semitic, I was like, I don't think that's true. And then I started reading down it and looking at the cartoons, and I was like, well, these cartoons are clearly anti-Semitic, even though they're kind of covering themselves in the guise of being anti-Israel. So they've kind of wanted you to ask these questions by making you think at first they were saying the opposite.
Well, right. And the basically, like, they're trying to say that any, they're taking some of these, they're basically saying that, like, any time that you talk shit about Israel, it is anti-Semitic because Israel equals Judaism. And of course, that is the problem. The problem is that is not, Israel does not equal Judaism. And actually anti-Zionism has a very rich history. And we've talked about this before too, but anti-Zionism has a very rich history inside of Judaism, in particular in places like Northern Africa and Europe. And then of course later in the US. But this is something that Jews themselves have fought against for a very long time. And so the idea that Israel is equal to Judaism is actually the source of a lot of anti-Semitism, because what happens is that people see what Israel is doing, and then on top of that, they see that, well, the U.S. just continues to give billions of dollars to Israel, but we can't fucking afford food, so obviously our government is controlled by evil Jews who are just trying to take over the world. So this sort of like gross support for the apartheid state of Israel by the United States in particular really leads to anti-Semitism. And the idea that you can never critique Israel also leads to anti-Semitism, because it's like, look, we can't talk shit about Israel because our media and everybody else is controlled by Jews, which is of course ridiculous. But like, so actually the ironic thing is that when you can't openly talk about how horrific Israel is, it actually is anti-Semitic. And so it's important, I would say that really just understanding to Greta here that question, that any time that you are saying anything about Israel, it would be like talking shit about Angela Merkel. That doesn't mean that you're anti-Germanic. It just means that Angela Merkel does some stupid shit, and the state of Germany does not equal people who identify as German or have German ancestry or whatever.
Right. So what people, the basis of what people need to realize, I feel like, is Israel is a nation, and like any other nation, I mean, at least currently, like any other nation, it has policies and actions, and those policies of that nation can be criticized. I mean, if you were to say they can't, then that'd be fucking ridiculous. I mean, God, what could be done if a nation's policies can't be criticized? So when Israel has soldiers with guns shooting children in the Great March of Return and shooting medics and elderly and all these things, like, you absolutely should feel obligated to criticize that type of behavior. But if you want to know what anti-Semitism is, it's when you go a step further and you go, well, the Jews just do that type of stuff.
Right.
Then that's anti-Semitism. And so this Anti-Defamation League website has these anti-Semitic cartoons, which is them trying to show what anti-Semitism looks like. And they're criticisms of Israel because they have like the Israeli flag or whatever, but the depictions of Israel or of the people in it are these old anti-Semitic tropes of, look at these horrible Jews giving birth to a devil baby and, have a crooked nose and all this stuff. So whoever drew these cartoons are like white supremacists probably who are combining criticisms of Israel with anti-Semitism. And the Anti-Defamation League wants you to confuse all of that so that you think that Israel can never be criticized.
Right, and I guess perhaps a better parallel is rather than Germany would be Saudi Arabia or something, and saying that you can't criticize Saudi Arabia because that's Islamophobia. No, it's not. Not even just like on the pure basis of the fact that there are so many different branches of Islam, but also because Wahhabism is really an extremist version of Islam that most Muslims across the world do not agree with and do not follow. And so this sort of understanding that we need to openly critique Saudi Arabia, we need to say that this is not okay. It's the same thing, but if we go a step further and say because Muslims are horrible human beings, well, that's fucked up. So the same sort of logic applies. But I would say please do openly and frequently criticize the state of Israel. And if you would feel more comfortable, I know that some people, both Lee and I are culturally Jewish. I know that some people who aren't feel that sometimes they need to make it clear in that post or in the conversation that, by the way, we should also make sure that we don't conflate Judaism and the state of Israel. Please do so, because I think that that's also an important message to continue putting out there, that these two things are not the same, particularly as we do see a rise of anti-Semitism across the world. So, but please do not feel that you need to avoid critiquing Israel. And we really need to do that, not least of all because of the tight ties that the United States has to Israel in so many ways, including, an exchange program for U.S. police to be trained by Israeli police and military forces on how to be oppressive.
And anybody else, thank you again for the listener question, Greta. If anybody else wants to email us questions or topics, we are always checking for your emails. That is commoncensored@protonmail.com. Feel free to send topics and ideas that direction. Let's move on to what's going on in Wisconsin.
Yes. This kind of ties into the whole, exchange, the deadly exchange, as it's known. So folks might have heard by now, if you were looking online, that basically it was yesterday, it was Sunday, August 29th, that Jacob Blake, a black man in Kenosha, Wisconsin, was shot in the back 7 times by police officers. Reports indicate that the police were on the scene to respond to a domestic dispute, and the victim, Jacob Blake, was attempting to help settle it. This is via Kenosha News. And there's a video circulating. Please, people, before you share it, please consider if you need to share it. And then if you are going to share it, please post a content warning. Because particularly for Black and brown folks, this is just a re-traumatization. So please consider before posting if you feel that you need to. So in the video, Jacob can be seen walking to his car and opening the door before being restrained by a police officer and shot point blank in the back. A reporter for WISN, a news channel in Wisconsin, later confirmed that the victim is 29-year-old Jacob Blake. And he is currently, as we're recording this, still in critical condition. And you can there's an organization called Anti-Racism Daily that you can subscribe to their newsletter and get updates, and you can go to antiracismdaily.com to learn more. But they're also asking that folks take action by donating to the Milwaukee Freedom Fund, which is extending support to protesters in Kenosha who are obviously now on the ground, and also calling local officials to demand that the police officers are held accountable for this. And if you go to Anti-Racism Daily, either on Instagram or on their website, you can find more information on how to join up for that particular issue.
And these police officers, or at least the one that fired, should absolutely be charged with attempted murder. They likely will not be. I mean, I imagine if there's large protests, which there are, then they'll be fired or something. But I think whenever you see these moments, which, as we know, happen pretty regularly in America, we just need to keep repeating the stats that 99.9% of the time, the cops that kill people, and they kill over 1,000 people a year, are not successfully charged with murder. It is a tiny number. Over the past 15 years, it's something like 3 cops have been successfully imprisoned for murder charges. Mm-hmm. So it really is that they can kill with impunity. And obviously, the Black Lives Matter protests and the have gotten much bigger recently. And I just feel like those type of stats need to be repeated over and over again. It's not the type of thing that you could say once and just, because our mainstream media will probably mention that occasionally, that it's rare for a cop to get prosecuted for this, but they won't get into it regularly. Like, most people don't realize that the vast majority of the time the cops kill people, and we're talking, some of these killings are like, shot 15 times, even though he didn't have a gun, those type of things. They're often not even prosecuted. So it's incredible what the level of impunity that police officers in this country operate at.
And just to add to the police officers there apparently weren't wearing or didn't have their body cameras on, which again speaks to the problem of, we should just have them wear body cameras. But of course, as we've, the internet is already awash with this video.
There was an electric storm in the area, and so the camera wasn't working. He had on some low-hanging necklaces that happened to cover up the body cam.
Well, right. And of course, as we've seen in, many other cases, just because it's filmed doesn't mean a shit bit. So, let's not rest on these sort of ideas that, if it's on film. And also, important to highlight that this was a domestic dispute where cops were called, and apparently Jacob Blake was trying to break it up, basically trying to de-escalate. Which is something cops are, supposed to do. But instead they chose to shoot him in the back 7 times. So again, I think it's really important that we recognize that police should never be called for these type of situations, these type of domestic disputes, which are, in this case already being, dealt with or handled by a community member, or that there are other avenues than calling people with guns that are obviously, of course, as we know very well, very eager to use those guns, particularly on Black and brown folks. So I think that it's really important that, we really not just sort of have these theoretical questions about, if we, police could be used for, no. Police should never be called for these situations. Listen. And actually, full disclosure, I'm an absolute police abolitionist. I think that communities do far better when there is no occupying force, and that there are community ways of dealing with these domestic disputes, or even actual violence.
Whenever I have an argument, I always feel, what would help is a dummy with a gun who at his house has UFC posters that he considers high art. I always think that will help the situation.
Or how about the police chief of D.C.? I don't know how other police chiefs are because I don't know their stories as well, but I'm assuming there's parallels. The police chief in D.C., Police Chief Newsham, is not only a white supremacist, but he's also a wife beater. So cool.
Not the T-shirt. You mean the activity.
I wish he was just a T-shirt, because then I could just rip him up into little shreds and throw him away.
Yeah. So moving on to let's squeeze one more topic in here. California, we haven't talked about climate change in a few episodes, and California is facing two of the largest fires that have ever hit the state in state history. And simultaneously, there is the first ever two hurricanes simultaneously, or they may form into hurricanes, bearing down on the Gulf Coast and Florida. And, so both of these, they're like, oh, this is historically incredible. But they don't seem to mention that you notice how every year now is historically incredible. Each of these, they're like, wow, this fire season was one for the history books. And it's like, no, because it's not. Because next year it'll be even worse. And people are not going to go back and read about the great fires of 2017 because they had the great fires of 2018 and 2019 and 2020.
Right.
So I think we have to understand this is the new normal, and I don't mean that in kind of like a get used to it and just go about your lives. I mean like this should absolutely change the way we all live. Our lives should, to some degree, be a lot less about what we thought they were about and a lot more about how are we going to turn this into a sustainable planet.
Right, absolutely. We shouldn't accept, and again, this circles back to the issue of media literacy. You look online and you're like, it's the worst storm in 100 years, but you said that fucking last year. So then it's the worst storm in 11 months. That's right. What that means. So it's important that we're able to look at how these things are couched and understand that the extreme effort to mitigate the severity of the situation should rather be spent on trying to mitigate the severity itself, not just how it looks, but how it actually is. So yeah, it's I think I fucked up how that came out in my through my face hole, but in my brain that sounded pretty good. But what I meant is that
maybe I wasn't paying close enough attention. I didn't feel like I was dizzy at any point, but
no, but I just assumed that you're kind of like half paying attention. So
well, listen, just because I have these finger puppets out does not mean I'm not enjoying this podcast.
But basically, like it's so important that we not lose sight of this. Particularly, I mean, I know that like with everything else that's going on, it can feel so heavy to then be like, oh, one more thing that I have to fucking pay attention to while I'm trying to desperately figure out how to pay rent. And it's more so to draw in the fact that all of these things are interconnected, that we don't live single issue lives, that there's no such thing as a single issue under this horror show that is capitalism during the age of climate change, and that we have to to recognize the solidarity to be built in order to address all of these issues and not just singular ones.
Yeah, I mean, it truly is we're living a sociopathic existence. It's like we know we're killing ourselves and the planet, and it just depends on, are we actually going to make the large-scale changes that are needed, or are we just going to look at each other and go, man, we really are killing ourselves and the planet. Yeah, we are. Here we go. Okay, man. I mean, it's bizarre, and it's like I feel like even right-wingers, like most of them now understand, even if they may continue to deny climate science, they still can look around and see that like there's massive fires and hurricanes, and that the soil on their farms is not producing like it used to, and various things like that. You'd think that even they would be like, yeah, I don't know if we can keep living this same way forever.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Well, guys, we're headed over to, actually, we're kind of continuing this conversation because I wanted to talk about Biosphere 2. We're going to go over and talk about that on patreon.com/commoncensored. Please join us over there. We'll do an extra 10 to 15 minutes like we do every week. If you feel like you've gotten $1 of content, please become a member over at patreon.com/commoncensored. We're not sponsored by anyone. No one else pays for this show. It's just you guys. And the other thing I wanted to note, which I said at the beginning, is that I've been doing a lot more moment of clarities, short 15, 20-minute videos almost every day on various news or topics that are breaking news. And you can get those every single day at leecamp.com. So if you wake up or you go to bed or whatever, if you just regularly go to leecamp.com, you'll get a new story every day. So please join me over there. And how about your stuff?
And my stuff, the overarching my stuff is over at artkillingapathy.com. I currently have a deal on for the month of, the rest of this month. For my film, Hard Road of Hope, is now available for 50% off. So it started at a sliding scale of $5. Now it starts at a sliding scale of $2.50.
That's actually at hardroadofhope.com, right?
Yes, hardroadofhope.com, and you just type in the word Matewan, which is Matewan. This is also up on my Twitter and everything, and my Instagram and Facebook, so you can find that information there as well. But as always, or again, if you're part of an organization or an educator that would be interested in screening the film, I'm currently working with a few different orgs to set up screenings of the film, so please reach out to me over at artkillingapathy.com if that's of interest.
Thanks a lot, everybody. We'll see you next week. Keep fighting.
Act out.